Good evening and welcome to another edition of the curriculum. My name is Rebecca Ekpe. This evening we'll be focusing our attention on facilities, infrastructure and the learning environment in our basic schools. Our searchlight tonight is on whole municipality, and we will be looking at the learning environment and how that facilitates teaching and learning. One of the things that have actually hampered the implementation of the free compulsory universal basic education, the FQ program, is the infrastructural deficits and poor learning environment. We will be exploring this particular issue as we zoom into whole. I have been joined in the studio by three guests. I have to my immediate left Mr. Stephen Edu, who is Director in charge of Basic Education, Ghana Education Service. To his immediate left, I have Mr. Stephen Baffoe, who is Deputy Administrator of the GETFund. And to the far extreme end, I have Mr. Dickson Pi-Bansah, who has joined us from the Volta Region in Ho. He is Head of Human Resource Management and Development of the Ghana Education Service. Let me remind listeners that we are receiving this transmission today by courtesy of S.T.A.R Ghana, strengthening transparency and accountability and responsiveness in Ghana. Social media friends, you can join us in this discussion via Twitter. That's online with hashtag CurriculumGH, and follow our handle at CurriculumGH. And our friends, WhatsApp, you can also text us at 050 5311 879. Now, my first question will go to you, Mr. Edu. You're right next to me. You know, the education sector receives the largest single component of national budget, which is about 25% annually. But we still have gaps when it comes to, infrastructure, the learning environment. What accounts for that, and how can we address some of those issues as a nation?
Thank you very much, Rebecca. As we all know, and it's very true that education takes about between 25 to 30% of the national budget. But it is also important to note that this amount of money that comes to education, between 84 to 90% goes into salaries. That is salaries and allowances of teachers and other staff of the Ghana Education Service. So immediately you get to know that we have less than just about 10% to spend on other things like the infrastructure that we are talking about. So that is where the difficulty is, and we are only very lucky even to have the GETFund, which is supporting the infrastructure development. So that is where we have the problem. We have enough money, but the money goes more into salaries and allowances of teachers.
Why salaries and allowances? Why not investment? Because education is the bedrock of our society. Why allowances? Why salaries? What about the others? The infrastructure, the ones that will be long-term investment. I'll come to the others, but why is that so?
Yes, thank you very much. We would have loved to have enough of the funding going into infrastructure. But the human resource is also very, very critical, because once you put people there, by our labor conditions, you have to pay them. So, and we also look at the way our educational system is structured, the way they are dispersed across the country. And anywhere that we have school, we have to get teachers, we have to get other staff to support that. So it is not that we are intentionally just limiting the money that goes into infrastructure. But the point is that we have a lot of people that we have to pay, and that is also very important that we need to take care of.
Right. A lot of people that you have to pay, but are the people churning out what needs to be churned out? We've been to the ground. We've been to, a project that we're implementing in Obuasi, Cape Coast, and Ashaiman. We've seen the disparities that exist in our public versus our private education. One of them is the output. Are the children performing? We realize that the ones in the public schools are not performing as they should. The ones in the private schools are outperforming their counterparts in public schools. But of course, they are all going to write the same examination. That's what we're saying. Let's talk about how to break this gap. Now, the teachers who are in the private schools, we all know are mostly untrained, and these are statistics from the ground. And the ones in the public schools are trained, and yet there are disparities when it comes to output. So why then are we investing all this money into this whole thing? Mr. Pi-Bansah, you may want to take that because you are head of human resources, and our searchlight is on you. Why are you paying so much money to teachers whose output are not what is expected? Why are we investing in what is not giving us results?
Thank you, Rebecca. And first of all, let me say good evening to our cherished viewers. Yes, on the ground, it may seem as if our teachers in the public schools are not performing. But I don't know whether we've done that in-depth analysis to find out, because what some of us have done is, after everything, when they move from the basic school to the second cycle, that is where the competition starts, because they are given a level playing field. And you realize that those in the public schools perform better than those from the private school. This is a fact, because I have taken the trouble to carry out that research myself. Then as to why we have to spend on our teachers, as regards the quantum of money that is invested in or given to or granted to education. You see, we have engaged the teachers. We know that the schools are there, the numbers are there, so we have to pay them. It is not the teachers alone, the teaching alone that determines the outcome of there are other factors. The question is as to whether we have other facilities. If we go down, we realize that the parents, there are other stakeholders. That's why I said education is a very large industry. If the teachers are playing their part, then there are other questions to ask. Are the parents playing their part? What about the kids? Are they interested in learning? Where are their interests now? If we start asking these questions, then we will answer the question as to whether it is right paying the teachers that quantum of money, or we have to, I don't know whether labor law permits that, to cut down their salaries and then invest it into that, and I don't think that can happen.
More assessment and all that will see what their output is and pay them according to what they are. Because if you're teaching and the students are not passing, why do you have to pay them? I hope nobody attacks me after this show.
Rebecca, can I come in?
Yeah.
You did say that education is an investment.
Correct.
And education has a lot of constituencies that we have to take care of. And the human beings are part of the investment. And then secondly, from your paper, you've mentioned a number of issues that really go into quality education. The infrastructure is some of them. And we've also talked about so many other factors that contribute to enhance quality education. So the point is that, first of all, let's ask the question whether if the 25% that we are talking about is adequate. Is it enough as an investment of education? You see, sometimes we make comparison. Why do we have to compare? Because education might be different from maybe other ministries. So sometimes when you make that comparison, then you may be making a mistake. Because we talk of education, let's look at the spread of schools in this country. Every village that you go, you have a school there. And you have to get teachers to teach them. We know that there are some inefficiencies in the system, and that we are trying to address. But some of these inefficiencies are coming about because of the spread of the schools in this country. You go to a village, and that village may have just about 70 peoples. With these 70 peoples, if you want to use our people-teacher ratio, it means that you need just about 2 teachers for this particular school. And you can imagine if you have 2 teachers handling 6 classes, that's from class 1 to class 6. It is not very easy. We have to put 3 classes in one classroom for the teacher to handle. It's practically not appropriate. So that is why you may have to increase it. So you may go to some of these villages, and in a school like 70 people, you may have to add 1 or 2 to get about 4 teachers. And so when you divide the 70 by the 4, you realize that the unit cost is now going to be very, very high. So that is one of the causes that brings about the inefficiencies in the system. But it's not intentional, at least, to come up with that particular, but it's because of the practicality that we find ourselves in. That's why sometimes we talk about some of these inefficiencies. But one of the measures to address that is the rationalization that we are going about, so that we can deploy teachers to where their services may be needed to cut down on the inefficiencies in the system.
Correct. That comes to talk about access to education. Where are the schools sited and what have you? Right. Let me go to you, Mr. Stephen Baffoe. You are from the GETFund. What sort of programs, you're talking about infrastructure here, what sort of programs facilitate the provision of school infrastructure in the learning environment in the basic schools? I'm talking about the GETFund. You know, there are other people, there are other entities like the Assembly, like USA, like others provide all these. They are all, you know, how do you get them all together to facilitate and to make sure that they are coordinating to get the results that we need to cut down on waste?
All right, thank you very much, Rebecca. Before I answer your substantive question, just like to make a point about the output side of education, where you said that if you do a comparative analysis of output from private schools and public schools, you find that the private schools outweigh the public schools in terms of performance. As a teacher myself, sometimes I get worried that we limit our discussion about educational output, just fixing it on academic performance. Seriously, if you look at the school must train the child, must train the child's hand, must train the head, and must train the heart. But unfortunately, when we begin talking about school, all we look at is the A's and the B's and the C's and all that. I would think that if we're looking at, is the school helping the child to know that after drinking water, whether from a bottle or from a plastic bag, that bottle, that plastic bag must be put in a waste bin. If it is raining, because the child has gone to school, you know that I need to find a shelter. I need not be in the rains if I don't have anything to do in the rains. The point I'm making is that we need to also check attitudes and behaviors, because school is not there just to train the head. It is there to train the whole person. And so maybe in the future our discussions will go beyond just the A's and the B's, because what profit is of an A if the child who has obtained an A doesn't know that I need to also take care of the environment and to take care of my school environment, my home environment, and all the other places. I think we wouldn't have the problems we have when rains are coming, and in Accra we are running away. If our schools have taught our children not to litter, to pick waste and drop them where they are supposed to be. Again, the question about school infrastructure being better in private schools than in the public schools. I think if we just look at Accra and maybe some of the elite, for want of a better expression, elite schools in Accra, you may say that infrastructure in public schools look better than in private schools look better than in public schools. But if you go around the country and where some other people have established private schools, you would appreciate that the infrastructure provided by the public system far outweighs what some private individuals are providing. The issue, I think, at the end of the day, is not the quality of the infrastructure, but the output.
Correct.
And that is what I think we should be focusing on. However, if you come to GETFund, again, GETFund doesn't own any school in this country. The schools are owned, if they are pre-tertiary, they are owned generally by Mr. Adu and the Ghana Education Service. The tertiary institutions are controlled by the National Council for Tertiary Education. What the GETFund does is to sort of provide some funding supplement to what government will do generally in the provision of educational infrastructure. And the law that sets up the GETFund enjoins us to go to Parliament every year after consultation with the stakeholders, and the stakeholders are mainly the Ministry of Education, the Ghana Education Service, the National Council for Tertiary Education, to look at how we distribute the funding that will be available to the GETFund in every fiscal year among these stakeholders. So we don't, as it were, decide exactly where to put the infrastructure. That is determined by the stakeholders. And here, because we're talking about primary school, basic school, the Ghana Education Service, and the Ministry of Education. But again, we have to work with the stakeholders. So the municipal assemblies, the district assemblies, the metropolitan assemblies become very important. And what we have tended to do at the GETFund is to have a discussion with DCs and their agencies, their officers, to understand what the needs are in their respective district, metropolis, and metropolitan municipal areas, so that in designing the formula, we know the volume of responsibility placed on us by the data that is generated from the user districts and agencies.
The reason I asked you that question was, on the ground, when we've been to the ground, looked at some of the schools that have been constructed, the very new buildings, of course, nicer buildings, mostly are by the GETFund.
Yeah.
Now, my understanding is that GETFund provides that, like you explained, but of course you work in consultation with others, not just in isolation. But then you realize that there are some challenges on the ground. There are buildings without, you know, there's no electricity, or there's no furniture, or there's no that. So then the question is, how are you working with others? Because they don't mention to us USAID or others or others. Maybe they mention the assembly person, but everybody knows that you know it was provided by the GETFund. So how then, Mr. Baffoe, are you liaising or working with these agencies to ensure that you are collaborating, you are harnessing your resources together in working to ensure that when you put up a building, you know, you have a complete sort of, how are you facilitating that?
Yes, thank you very much. The Ghana Education Service, the Ministry of Education, help us to understand what designs, if they say a 6-classroom block with ancillary facilities, what that means. And when we mention ancillary facilities, we're talking about the head teacher's office, staff, common room, a library, then the washrooms. Remember, I have said that in every district, the district assembly plays a very important role, and their act, the act of establishing the district assemblies and all that, also allows the assemblies to pass their own bylaws. So with respect to sanitation facilities, the assembly define what sanitation facilities can be put within a certain geographical area with respect to every assembly. So if you go to places, yesterday as I was watching the documentary,
Correct.
you find that in one school there's a WC. It means that within that assembly, the bylaw might be that here in this district, if you're providing laboratory facilities, then it should be a WC. In some other places, dependent on the availability of water, they may say that a KVIP will pass for a sanitary facility in terms of toilets and washrooms. So our designs would fit into what the particular districts have made provision for in their bylaws. So the GETFund would only build to the standard provided in the designs by the Ghana Education Service or the Ministry of Education or the assembly that is the beneficiary of the project. But again, you might have seen some facilities without these, some school buildings without these facilities.
Correct.
Those might have happened in the past because we have now become aware of the importance of sanitation and school health. And so in our most recent designs, each one of the designs would have a toilet facility or a washroom of a certain kind.
Did you want to say anything?
If I may add
Go ahead.
a little to that. I think we all need to accept the fact that education is a process. We started some years ago. If you look at the time that education was handed over to us, when Nkrumah came by the 1951 Act, you could see that there were a lot of emphasis on infrastructure. And then you remember that, like Mr. Baffoe is saying, sanitation was not something that we really thought of as any serious thing. Toilet, people were just using themselves anywhere, urinating. Nobody even found it wrong for just urinating at any corner of the compound. But now, with modernization and then globalization, we've realized that some of these things were wrong. For instance, in the past, we were putting up single stories for our schools. But now that land is becoming difficult. That's why you see in Accra, we are now having a lot of story buildings, at least for our schools, where people may be thinking that such should be for the secondary school or should be for the university. But this time we are getting primary schools also using the story buildings. I know you went to Obuasi, you saw some of these story buildings there. So education is developing. So you realize that our taste is also changing with time. If you look at our design, like you were saying, standards also keep changing because we are asking whose standard and it's based on what. So you realize that in the past it was just simply 6 classrooms. Even when we started, it was 3 classrooms. You know, some time ago we started with the pavilions. You start with the pavilion and then you clad the pavilion and then it becomes a classroom. Some of us started under trees. We didn't care about schooling under trees. But now we realize that it is not fair for some children to school under trees. So you could see that things are changing. And I can tell you that even the sanitation provision that we are making these days, in about 5 or 10 years to come, we will find them not to be appropriate for our children. So we are developing. Once we have realized the challenges, then we know we can go ahead. Because if I take Volta Region for instance, our data indicates that when it comes to classroom infrastructure, those classrooms that need serious or major repairs, primary school is about 24%. So these are the buildings that are already there that need major repairs. I'm not even talking about those who don't have and we have to put up new infrastructure. So you can realize that we have identified these challenges and that is where we are working towards.
Right. Mr. Edu, I certainly appreciate that you mentioned that we have identified challenges, or we all agree that there are challenges in our system and we need to address them. Of course, education is the bedrock of our society, and without that, our future will be doomed, and it's good that we all agree that we have a problem. We'll be taking a break here, and we'll be looking at footage of the documentary that we screened yesterday on the curriculum. For those who did not watch it, they'll have a chance to look at a little bit of the footage. So if we're ready, we can roll with that. Welcome back to the curriculum. You have been watching footage there from schools, basic schools in the Volta region, that is in Ho. And what you saw came to you by courtesy of S.T.A.R Ghana, which is strengthening transparency and accountability and responsiveness in Ghana. This is a collaboration between S.T.A.R Ghana and GBC, that is the curriculum. Now, we just saw students or pupils from Hokoji Basic School lying down in the ground because of inadequate desks in the classroom. Mr. Pi-Bansah, you are from the Volta region.
Yes.
Why would our children have to lie down on the floor before they learn? I mean, why? Why is it so? I mean, I was there myself. This is not concocted. So I was there myself in the village. So how is that? Why?
In fact, to be very sincere, this is unacceptable. It's not right. This Hokoji EP Primary, this is a new structure. The old one was demolished to make way for Malco gas, expansion of Malco gas. Hence, this new one was built without furniture. Furniture was not supplied. But, at the close of every academic year, we have what is known as school census. And then we got to know that this particular school did not have enough furniture. They don't have the requisite furniture because they should be, if it's a primary school, it should be a desk. Yes, a dual desk. Fortunately or unfortunately for us, after you have come and left, we had supply from Ministry of Education, 400 pieces of desks. And this school, in fact, we were not able to meet the entire demand from that school, but we have supplied. And that was a fortnight ago. And we have 300 knockdown desks in the office right now to be assembled. And then we also, though we may not be able to meet their demand because of the demand from other schools, we are doing everything possible. And fortunately for us, World Vision has promised to supply 950 pieces of desks to whole municipality. And we are hoping that if this comes on board, then we'll be able to supply our schools. It is rather unfortunate that this situation, but let me say that we have some extreme cases. And this is one of them. Some, looking at the statistics I had yesterday from some of their complements of a furniture situation. It's not so much pronounced, but this is just unfortunate.
Because I gathered from the documentary, if you watched it, and from our, going on the ground to gather information, that the issue of furniture is a big one in Ho. Generally, it's not only that school. So then we, after interaction, you realize that the parents are not taking their words to certain schools because they realize that there's no furniture. So it's not only.
Rebecca, after we had a team from the office, normally we go on monitoring when schools reopen. We went on monitoring, and the reports that came, you see, this also boils down to culture of maintenance. When we visited some of the schools, we realized that we had these broken desks parked at the back of the classrooms. And what are what do you call it, a capitation grant meant for? To fix broken down this, but lack of initiative on the part of some of our heads. We could have just collaborated or invited the PTSMCs, get somebody from the community to help them fix this. So in fact, we've gone out, we've taken notice of the broken down ones, and we've immediately directed that they should they use their capitation, part of their capitation grant, to invite some of the community members to assist them to put these ones, the desks in shape. So that is what we
For
have done.
Pi-Bansah, you know the story about the capitation grant.
Yes.
We'll come to that. I mean, it's not, they're saying that it's not enough. So
Yes,
if you're asking them to use that to repair chairs, some of them before they come,
But
it's gone.
It's part of,
So,
it's part
you
of,
know,
it's part of when you are preparing, you put it in the SPIP.
How do you put it in when it comes and the money is gone? As we got from the documentary, you know, because of bank charges.
Yeah.
We'll be discussing that.
Yeah.
Hopefully we'll have time to talk about that. But I think this whole issue that we're talking about deals with futuristic and sustainable policies, not just doing something and that's it. We go to sleep. And we realized that even yesterday when the rains came, you saw what happened.
Exactly.
Some people never went to sleep. They got stuck in Malam and other places with their children in their cars as at 9 p.m. because of the problem we have.
Yeah.
We sweep and leave the garbage, but the gutters, it rains, it goes back in. We construct gutters and we leave them open in this day and age. So maintenance and our attitudes and all these problems, that's what is worrying us in this country.
And Rebecca,
futuristic policies, that's what we should have. Mr. Pi-Bansah.
yes, and to add to, you see, hitherto, whole municipality or whole district before it became a municipality was very huge, a very large district. 3 districts have been carved out of whole municipality. We have Whole West, Adaklu, and Ziofe, and hitherto it was one of the largest districts in the country. Now that let's say it has become very compact with lesser schools, then I think yes, the common fund from the assembly and other donors, because we have a lot of NGOs who are on board now to assist the municipality. The World Vision is there, Pencil of Promise, and then some of the performing and active SMCs and PTAs are also assisting. So we hope with the carving out of the 3 districts, I think the little that is given to the municipal assembly, I think will be put to better use.
You had an interruption.
Yes, just to, in support of what Mr. Baza has said, it is unfortunate that at this day and age you find children lying on their stomachs just to write or to read. But again, the GETFund is a system put in place to ensure that education infrastructure is provided largely, adequately for our schools. In this regard, this year as we were designing the distribution formula for the GETFund, we received policy directives from the Ministry of Education regarding furniture for basic schools, sanitation facilities and boreholes as well. So in the distribution formula for this year, in fact we started previously and we continue, and because you're talking about the future,
Correct.
once we have this in our formula, it means every year some allocation will be made to take care of furniture, water and sanitation facilities for schools in Ghana generally, and certainly Ho and the Volta region will be taken care of. As we speak now, I can say on authority that even some furniture allocation, authorization for the manufacture of furniture has been given already for some additional furniture to be provided to the Volta region, and the whole municipality is going to benefit from that. In fact, with this in place, I should think that soon children lying on their stomachs to write will become a thing of the past. Sometimes, you know, in the planning and development of infrastructure, you get some schools missing out on one thing or the other. I do not think that was a deliberate attempt by the Municipal Education Office or the Assembly to sort of put children in that kind of condition. But once it has been noticed and steps are being taken, I think we should follow up to make sure that everything is put in place for them. But again, the question is that do we look up to government for everything? Do we look up to the District Assembly for everything? God is big, and I hope Mr. Adu remembers, have some 16 principles of education, and says something that education can neither be free nor compulsory. That is debatable. But what that means for me is that, yes, government may be paying for the capitation, the school fees and stuff, but parents, the community, also have a responsibility to make sure that they complement the effort of the District Assembly and government. So, for example, if a school facility like a classroom block has been provided, it should be possible that within the community, and the community I mean within the district, the assembly or the PTA is making some provision to make sure that they meet the needs of the children halfway, so that when donors and GETFund, the ministry are also contributing, would have a total development of the school environment. When everybody sits back and says that, oh, because of FQ, everything is free, and so no one is putting their hands to the wheels, you certainly will find some of the schools lacking in some simple facilities that they shouldn't lack. But I should think that time has come for all of us to come together and say that this is the resource envelope that the nation has. It can go this far, but there should be some contribution somewhere. Free is okay, I agree, it must be free, but again, we should also anticipate that in the freeness of things, there will be the need for us to also contribute one way or the other to make our school environment complete and
Go ahead.
complete
your thoughts.
so that our children will not go through what we saw yesterday.
Yes.
I'm not in any way endorsing it. I'm saying that there is the need for some effort to be put in on the part of the other stakeholders to make sure that we complement one another in providing
Right.
infrastructure for our schools.
So whose responsibility is it at this point to ensure that other stakeholders are involved, like the community? Whose responsibility?
If you take the State Assembly, for example, it has responsibilities. The act that sets up the assemblies and the legislative instrument define what this assembly should be doing. In fact, if you talk about ownership, as in ownership of schools, I would say that at the district level, the schools are owned by the assemblies. And so in their planning, the assemblies should also make some room to make sure that they are putting in some facilities to complement what comes from Accra. Again, the school community itself, if you remember, the reforms in 1987 conceived of education as community-based. What that means is that parents, the school community, the local assembly, the local authority, could be the chief or whoever, everybody has a stake in making sure that we put in the community what we all can call a school.
Right.
In that doing, no one can stand idle by and say that, oh, we are waiting for GETFund, we are waiting for the Ministry of Education, we are waiting for the DC. We all must put our hands on deck.
Yes, Mr.
Can I
within
continue
the
from there?
Yeah, the question for you then, within the purview of the Ghana Education Service, do you have any policies in place that would involve, for example, the community to understand that the school is owned by the community?
Thank you very much. Before I come there, like I said, education has developed over the years through certain means. You know, before Nkrumah came, we had community participation on very high level, where the communities were establishing schools and all that. I know that when you talk to people in the past, they will tell you that, even I came to meet it, that every Tuesday the community will have to go to the school and then do communal labor. And that's where they were weeding around the schools, maintaining the furniture and whatever was broken, because they had a lot of all these artisans and whatever who supported the schools in the infrastructure development and whatever. And you also realize that most of the schools were even started by the communities. They start the school and then later the government absorbs it and then it become a public institution. So you realize that along the line, maybe, I don't know what happened, but the intention or the implication was that the schools are for the government. So at that point, the government started supplying some of these things. But I think we have realized that education, government alone cannot really fund education. We need to bring in all the other stakeholders. And as you're saying, the community involvement in education is very, very crucial. Because if you go to a place, the window has maybe one side has 2 hinges. One is sometimes not even off. One nail is off. Then the next time you go, another nail is off. Then you will see that window hanging. The next time, the third nail is gone. Then the last nail goes off and the window falls down. The next time, the window has been taken by somebody as firewood or something like that. But you realize that when that one meal was removed, and if somebody has taken care of it, we wouldn't have maybe gotten to where that became a firewood. So the point I'm driving at is that we need to look at how all these things can be put together. How are we planning our system? I know that you will go to some schools where they have excess of furniture because somebody there, either the MP at the assembly or coming from the government, and you realize that they are dumped there. Whereas you go to some schools, there are no furniture. So the point is that how do we deploy people, maybe how do we distribute the furniture in such a way that there will be fairness is one thing. Then we come to maintenance. It's also one of the key areas that we need to look at because furniture has a lifespan. So once it is moving through the years, we need to make sure that we repair. But the question is who is repairing? We have provided some funds under the capitation grant for the schools to do the maintenance. But as you are saying, it might not be enough to do what they want to do. So that's where the community will have to come in. And again, if you look at the law, Act 778 provides that the assembly, the district assembly, is the owner of the school. So they are supposed to take care of both basic education and secondary education. So in effect, the owner of the schools is the assembly.
Yes.
But I'm hoping that in the long term, as we move towards a decentralized system, where the local government will then be given all the powers that they need, I think we'll be able to address some of these challenges. So that, as Stephen said, we will not be waiting for the government to be supplying furniture before we get there.
Everybody wants to push it to somebody else. The assembly is responsible, but who is making sure that the assembly is doing its work? We'll come to that. Who is making it possible?
You realize that?
Mr. Du, hold your thought. We're taking another break.
Okay.
We'll be picking up another footage here from our documentary, The Curriculum. Welcome back. This is The Curriculum. You were just watching a footage on our documentary series, The Curriculum, that is Aklamakwetoi MA Primary School in the Volta region. It's about 45 minutes drive from Nive. Nive is close to, I believe, to Togo. And it's very interesting. I remember when we went there to shoot the footage. And one of the primary 2 or primary 4 pupils escorted us from the junction on a bicycle whilst we were aboard, the crew was aboard a vehicle. It was quite interesting to watch this young boy, enthusiastic, paddling, you know, and going all the way, and he said it was just here, and just here was longer than what God, I mean, you could imagine. But very interesting, the boy was so enthusiastic, but it beats my, it's heartbreaking when we got to the school and realized that the school has no proper building, and the children are sitting under thatched roof. and this is what we're talking about, the disparities are huge. The energy from that child and from many others, it's not compensated by the educational provision that these children are being given. Mr. Pi-Bansah is from Ho. Tell us, why is it so? Why are, pupils in such places not receiving why is it taking so long for them to have a proper building?
Yeah, Rebecca, Accra Ekpe has a peculiar history. You know, hitherto they were commuting from Accra Ekpe to Nive. That was where they had the nearest basic school. But because of government policy that within 3 kilometers you need, where there's a community, you need to put a school there. In fact, they started the school themselves, but the enrollment was very poor. But they were very determined. For that matter, because of the cluster of villages around, they all pulled their resources together to start this school. In fact, it's a school that is very dear to the heart of the directorate. We visit the schools as and when we have the opportunity, the least opportunity. Fortunately for us, when you came and left, after talking to the municipal director, and as my friend has also said, they've awarded this contract to a contractor has even moved to site to start a 6-class unit classroom, and I read it in the Assembly's report yesterday. Then they don't have, because you saw a teacher teaching without a computer.
Correct.
Yes. Fortunately for us, we took delivery of these better laptops, and quickly we sent 10 to the school so that they can also be using, though they don't have electricity.
All right.
This is what we've done for them for now.
Thank you. Yeah. Mr. Baffoe, GETFund, how does GETFund come into a situation like this? One of the issues that came up when we interacted with the teachers there was that they have to walk about 45 minutes to get to school, including the children. Access to education for them is a problem, not only to educational teaching and learning materials, but even to the facility. Yeah. How does GETFund come in a situation like that?
Thank you very much. As Mr. Bansah has said, the issue is about policy. And again, Mr. Edu also mentioned, times have changed at the priority. Communities begin the school, and you would assume, I remember when I left training college many years ago, 1985, the community was prepared to get me accommodation. The school was there, but the community was prepared to do something. The point is that we have a resource envelope this big with demands that large. So you always have to prioritize and look at what do we need to do immediately. The schools we saw, the all those places. At the beginning of 2009, we had about 5,000 of such schools all across the country. They've been started by the communities, just like what we saw over there. And when GETFund took the census, government began to address and continue to address them. So if you recall, we have this Schools Under Trees project. As we speak, the GETFund through the Ministry of Education, the Ghana Education Service, has been funding about 3,151 of such schools across the length and breadth of this country. Okay. The difficulty is that the inflows are not as regular as it should be, and so quite a number hasn't been completed. But we believe very strongly that as the Ministry of Finance makes resources available to the GETFund, we will be able to continue to spread these facilities in an attempt to remove the schools under trees. All
right. You mentioned something like we have, an envelope this large, and we have a lot of requests. Yeah. I believe that decentralizing education will be probably a solution to some of these, instead of spreading it, decentralizing it, and then getting the people within the certain confines to understand that this is for them and getting them to address the issues directly instead of a whole big chunk. Mr. Edu, what do you think?
Yeah,
and also supervising the assemblies. Who should supervise them?
Yeah, decentralization in itself is a good idea, meaning that the people who are there, they know and understand their challenges more than somebody who is coming from outside. Because if you listen to Stephen, that's saying that the envelope, I don't think will be able to address all the challenges. from my records, for instance, if you pick Hope, we have Akwiti Early Primary School, Seviave Akopo, Lumi Achame, Ekumfi Isam, Nuria Islamic Basic School, PJ EP, the Doi, LA Basic, Volta Barracks, and Hohausen. All these schools have benefited from the GETFund project since 2009. So this just for Hope. So we can imagine that we have a number of projects going on. So when we decentralize, then we expect that the district assemblies will get closer to decision making in deciding what is a priority. Because if we leave everything to the national, the problem will be that there are so many challenges and it becomes very difficult to decide which is a priority. Now, as Minister of Education and Ghana Education Service, our priority is infrastructure and then sanitation programs, and that is what we are addressing in the next years ahead. So we realize that decentralization is good, but we still need to put some supervisory measures in place to ensure that priorities are given to things that are very
30 seconds.
Yeah, very quickly. You find that in the District Assembly law, there's a District Education Oversight Committee headed by the District Chief Executive. When you come to the school level, there's a School Management Committee, which is also headed by a parent. I think the chairman of the PTA or somebody said it. Then below the SMC is also the PTA. So there are structures within the communities where people own the schools and have responsibilities and roles to play. So if we whip these structures into operation, certainly we'll be able to deal with some of these things.
Thank you very much. We'll continue the discussion on our social media and other platforms. The curriculum is what you've been watching. Thank you very much, Mr. Dickson Pi-Bansah from Whole Municipality. You are Head of Human Resource Management and Development. Mr. Stephen Baffoe, Deputy Administrator of the GETFund. Stephen Edu is Director in charge of Basic Education, Ghana Education Service. You've been watching the curriculum, which came to us by courtesy of S.T.A.R Ghana, strengthening transparency and accountability as well as responsiveness in Ghana. We have a lot of messages from our social media friends. Some of them were saying this is a very interesting topic. Basic facilities are the obstacles in basic schools. And then for one of the teachers, somebody in Ho said, there's no single computer in my school. Hopefully, that computer will be gotten to the school after this program. Thank you very much for being with us. This is another edition of Curriculum. Join us in 2 weeks for another edition of Curriculum. Thank you very much. My name is Rebecca Ekpe. Have a good evening.